Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the kind words, Anthony. I appreciate everyone's efforts to be here. I know everyone enjoys lunchtime. Um, the name of the talk that I'm going to present to you today is Assuring or Not Assuring Quality. It's a bit misleading, but the idea behind it is kind of the same. We want to explore who is responsible for the quality assurance nowadays in our projects. And I'm going to walk through some of the steps that we took and some of the processes that we implemented to create a higher collaborative space where everyone takes ownership of changes all the way through rather than handing them over between us in the team. Um, Cool. If we kick things in, who am I? I am a continuous delivery and automation advocate. I've been working as an automation test engineer for almost 10 years now, and I'm currently head of quality engineering at Wolf Wizards, a small fintech in Midlands offering automated regulated financial advice. To put a bit of background, I guess, behind all this, us as a team engineering at Wolf Wizards, we were always interested in continuous delivery. And what continuous delivery is basically the ability to get changes of all types into production or into the hands of the users safely and quickly in a sustainable way, as Jess Humble presents this. Um, so we wanted to implement a methodology and a process where we can actually deliver to our customers value, um, a process that's it's going to achieve through resilience, not just ability, and it's going to unify all the disciplines. So looking at the quality processes, delivery processes, releasing, and we had all the capabilities, we had all the infrastructure. We are working in a microservices architecture. We are small teams with small context to our product. So basically, we have all the capabilities and the infrastructure to release faster and to go into this type of pipeline. So our mantra, our goal was to deliver actually safely at speed, because due to the nature of the business, we need to have some level of auditing and traceability. We are fully regulated by FCA, providing automated financial advice. So this sometimes could feel like a big barrier against our mantra because we do want to deliver faster, but then we also need to make sure we deliver safe. And what we wanted to achieve, part of our engineering team, as I mentioned, was to build a culture of quality that is automation led, and it's always looking for fast feedback rather than waiting till the end of the pipelines. Our testing, our focus was also a lot on the testing manifesto. I don't know if you're aware of this. It's part of the Growing Agile blog. But we were always looking at testing basically throughout the life cycle rather than testing at the end. We wanted to prevent bugs rather than finding them at the end. We wanted to test understanding over checking functionality and then building the system right from the beginning rather than breaking it and finding bugs at the end. And one really important one for us was the team responsibility for quality over tester responsibility. So with all this mantra behind us and all this vision behind us, we created our processes and we created our vision. And actually, we did consider the testing manifesto in our approaches, because we did consider actually shifting all this idea of shifting left the approval gap. So basically, through discovery, trying to understand upfront what we're trying to deliver, so that we can be a lot more confident in the end when we want to deploy and monitor. With all this in mind, so this was our vision. This is what we wanted to have. The reality was that actually it was a good thing that we were 5 QAs in our chapter across 12 engineers in 4 stream value streams teams. I have a typo there. So actually, it was a really nice ratio. And even now, comparing with any other teams, I guess we do have a really good ratio. So we have 1 QA engineer to 2-3 developers. it was also really good. It's actually really good even now that engineers want more ownership. So they want to be involved in testing. They want to take ownership of their work. They wanted to see it in live, but they didn't quite understand how to do that because still the QA engineers, for example, were owning automated checks. They were owning the dashboards. The team didn't quite understand um, the automation test packs that we had, how they should run, in what circumstances, test environments. So it was quite difficult with the understanding of where our automated checks. The automation was a task at the end or even later. We found ourselves quite in few positions where actually we didn't create automated checks because of time or other reasons. And also we had quite a bit of flakiness in our test packs because we didn't quite necessarily have the time to focus on it. Um, I think if you can mute your microphone, please. I think there is someone in the background. Thank you. What wasn't good at all was that actually there wasn't much shared understanding created, even if we practiced loads of ceremonies and we looked at agile testing and agile principles. Um, we had sessions. We were doing a lot of analysis, grooming. We were still finding ourselves in a lot of back and forth uh, whenever we were picking up the testing basically activities in the team. So actually we understood that the shared understanding wasn't so shared because we were still not understanding the same thing. We weren't on the same page. And as seen in quite a few teams still nowadays, quality engineer was still seen as a gatekeeper. Oh, that's interesting. My fire alarm started. It was just a test. Okay, cool. The quality engineer was still seen as a gatekeeper. So even if with the best intentions in our teams, the engineers at the end of the day were still thinking that actually there is a quality engineer there, standing there and actually being a gatekeeper, that safety net. So it was good, but it was taking that ownership, I guess, step back. And as I mentioned, we wanted the whole team to take responsibility for quality. So we got the buy-in. The team wanted to be involved in automated checks, in the whole testing process, but they didn't quite know where to start exactly. Um, they still had that gatekeeper confirmation from a QA engineer. They still had that process in place. And even so, even if we wanted to take shared ownership over our quality, the testing was still a phase on a board. We had our own column, and the tester was still seen as responsible for quality. So we're still there with our quality gate, basically giving the go no go for any ticket that was going through our boards. At one point, though, something happened, and that was a webinar. So we discovered this one. I totally recommend it to you to read it. And actually, I'm going to have quite a few references in this talk because the experiments that we've made are based on this webinar. And this one, Penny Wyatt is speaking about quality is bigged and how Jira actually does QA in their environment. And she starts really good with a really good point that actually more QAs don't mean necessarily more quality. And she made references that they do have a team of 70 developers with only 5 QA engineers. So imagine how we found ourselves, in what situations we found ourselves when actually we realized we do have a team of 5 QA engineers with 12 developers. So if we're going to scale up the engineering team, does it mean that we need to bring more QA engineers, or do we need to look at our practices to see how actually we can work it out? So that was the trigger for us, I guess. We looked at the webinar. We looked to see what we wanted, what we could implement in it, and we really liked the idea behind what they were proposing. Why? Because what they mentioned was that if engineers that master testing not only increase the efficiency and the capacity of their teams, but they also write higher quality software. They were also looking at the efficiency side, basically trying to, and it was a good point, basically trying to, if you prevent bugs before they are written, it means you save time. Basically, you don't waste time in finding those bugs and investigating them and fixing them. So you save time. So that means you're going to be more efficient. You're going to write more code. You're going to refactor more. So that means in the end that the teams can ship faster and they can have more confidence that the quality remains high standard as they wanted from the beginning. Another reason, basically trying to look into some of these approaches, was the independence, because again, the Atlassian team made a good point that when testing can be confidently shared, the people who are passionate about quality, such as great testers, can focus on solving the root cause of the quality problems, in addition to discovering their symptoms. So what they mentioned was that if engineers basically focus more on testing their own work, that means that overall we're going to see an improvement in efficiency, and actually you can give more time to your QA engineers, your QA team, testers, how you want to call them, to focus on bigger problems. So they will not actually waste their time trying to find bugs in your code, for example, in engineers' code, when actually they could focus on bigger problems, trying to enable you to be even more efficient, even more faster. So taking a step back basically and seeing how they could help you. Um, all this reasoning and all this experiment that they've done actually resonated with us a lot. And we were really bought into it as a group, as an engineering group, because this is really important point as well. So we thought to actually give it a try. Um, So the experiment. The first point that we've made was to look at the metrics. So we tried to understand some metrics to see how where we are today, basically where we were back then, and where we want to be, so we can measure any tweaks that we're making in our processes, anything basically, so we can learn from them. Um, our processes were Kanban, and we have loads of columns, loads of phases to understand exactly how we're doing as a team. So we started with the cycle time registered, between in progress and when it's ready to ship. So what it means is that we were starting to count when actually something was picked up to be implemented, and then we were looking until the work was ready to ship, basically. We didn't look initially until basically something was live in production, because at that point we used to do trained releases. So basically we were bulking up a couple of tickets, for example, in a release, and sending them every couple of days, let's say. So we didn't want this to hinder, I guess, our metrics, because we knew there was a slight delay in the release process. So we said as a starting point, we're only going to look basically from when we start picking up the work until it's ready to be shipped, so we can see basically throughout the development lifecycle how we can actually improve the processes. The other metric that we looked at was ticket rejection rate, and actually Atlassian are speaking about this one as well. So this metric is looking at how many times a ticket is going back and forth, and this one was really important for us because um, we knew we were going back and forth between our phases quite a lot. And actually, after we implemented this, we had the data to prove this. So if before, I didn't mention this, we had a cycle time before of a week and 4 days, an average, basically to finish something between in progress and ready to ship. So that gives around 11, 12 days, basically. So that's quite a bit of time. With the addition of this metric, ticket rejection rate, we've seen that actually in test phase was was going back and forth basically around, on average, around 63% times. So that means from 100 tickets, 63 of them would go at least once back, uh, which, if you're looking in retrospect, it means that basically more than half of your time as a team is wasted on fixing bugs and fixing broken understanding. So we understood that actually this is something that definitely we need to improve, because half of our time was wasted basically on fixing bugs and, as I mentioned, fixing broken understanding. It was something that we definitely wanted to look at. Um, After we implemented the metrics, now that we had the metrics, we were able to actually start an experiment and see how everything goes in the team, basically, throughout our life cycles. So the next step was to visualize our entire workflow to identify bottlenecks. So as I mentioned, we are working in Kanban, uh, but I wouldn't see why you wouldn't be able to do this if you're working in a Scrum, for example. Because what we wanted to see here was, where is that time wasted? So we knew it takes a lot of time, I guess, between picking up some work and actually being ready to be shipped. So the release process, the release time wasn't even included in this. So this was only to implement and test a piece of work. And it was a lot of time actually wasted. The only note that I wanted to make here was that, um, we were our approach, being in financial services and being in a regulated environment, um, makes us take a bit of a more cautious approach to our releases. So our goal there basically is to release only user value. So that means, for example, in this situation, we don't count tiny changes to a service, to a small API, which is not actually bringing end user value necessarily. So we were only looking at stream value, basically, feature work here, which could be quite complex as well. And we were comfortable that it takes a couple of days to implement these, but definitely we weren't comfortable that it took on average 2 weeks, I guess, to implement some new feature, for example. So we started visualizing our entire workflow, and what we've done, based on the examples that we got from Atlassian, we actually changed it a bit. So what we've done is, before development, we added this phase, which is the task kickoff. And why we've done this, because we wanted to pair upfront, we wanted to understand upfront, basically, um, to understand the risks, to understand the edge cases, to understand the test approach, how we're going to test and how we're going to validate that piece of work. We wanted to do all that at the beginning, so that we have that shared understanding created up front. The next phase is in development, basically. So in progress, where developers basically are writing their code, they're writing unit tests, component tests, what type of tests they need. The extension to that now is that the developer, based on the outcomes from this session, test kickoff, um, they also need to write their acceptance tests, automated if they need to, basically. So the test kickoff is a session where we discuss, okay, it's a tiny change, we're gonna make it here, and we're gonna validate it using these type of tests, manual, automated, depending on the change. um, Now that you have the approach, you go into in progress, where, as I mentioned, you implement and you test, you create your automated checks for that to prove your work. And then we still have the test phase as a whole, because we acknowledge that actually it's not a column owned by the QA engineer. It's actually a phase in the development lifecycle. And because it was really important for us to identify bottlenecks, we thought that actually it's better to split into more granular phases, so you can exactly see where the bottleneck is. So our test phase was still there, but what we had changed was we had a developer on test. So what it meant was that actually the developer itself himself or a different developer from the team is going to be testing the story using both the testing nodes created in this test kickoff and their own exploratory testing skills. And of course, you're going to think, well, how can an engineer, I don't know, there's a different type of skill set between a QA engineer and a developer. Was that successful or not? But I'm going to get into that detail later. Um, so that was the idea. Basically, we're going to have a developer and test. QA engineers are not going to do the testing anymore. The aim was that the developers are actually going to test their own work. And what we meant by testing was acceptance testing, some exploratory as well, adding automated checks where we needed to, um, so we can actually be comfortable that we can release into ready, for example, into production. Um, After a couple of iterations, we also added this phase, which is a demo. And what it meant is at the beginning, not everyone is comfortable. Until you learn and until you get comfortable, you need to have that buffer, I guess, and you need to have that buffer of getting feedback. So what we've seen a couple of times was that the developer was getting comfortable here. We were ready to ship. And then, I don't know, some exploratory was happening maybe during this phase, and we were discovering issues. So after a couple of iterations, we decided to move this closer before actually starting the shipping process. So what happens is once the developer is comfortable with the change, we added this demo state where he can demo to the quality engineers or to the product owner, your stakeholders, depending on who you have, um, demo the work itself. So basically, you define upfront what you want to implement and how you're going to prove that work. You implement it, and then you demo at the end to say, this is the change, this is what I considered. You get any feedback if you need to, basically getting that sanity check in the team and the collaboration loop. um, Once you're comfortable with it, uh, depending if you need to, for example, if it's not done up front, what happened for us was that with more complex features, we wanted to add an exploratory session on its own so that the whole team basically it's going to work together for a time box, I don't know, 30 minutes, an hour, depending on how long you need and depending on the complexity of the work, basically to try and break a feature. And once all these are done and everyone is happy, you start the shipping process because um, you are comfortable that the work is as you would expect it to be. I mentioned quite a few terms there, and I have a few details, I guess, over these techniques. So as per their tutorials as well, we implemented this dotting, and actually, it's a really popular term in our teams now. Who's going to do the dotting? Because what it means is actually we don't have QAs responsible for testing itself. Actually, the developers in the team are going to pick up that responsibility. So they're going to be on the testing duty too. Um, this practice, this technique is going to introduce engineers to the idea of testing and improve their skills and make it explicit that actually quality is a shared responsibility. But that doesn't mean that they're going to be an expert from day one. It takes a lot of learning and a lot of pairing so that everyone gets comfortable with everything. Long term, it's going to be less QA, less bottleneck over the QA engineers because actually the developers can be comfortable picking up their own work. And ideally, long term, you would want to feel confident that actually the original developer has sufficiently tested for the risks outlined in the test kickoff session. So it's up to you, I guess, if you want to try another developer being on the testing duty. We tried, it didn't quite work for us. But what we currently do now is the same developer actually is taking full ownership. So he's part of the kickoff sessions, implementation, and then proving his own work from an acceptance point of view. So not necessarily from a exploratory basically point of view. And that's why we have the additional session basically to have a second pair of eyes get away from that confirmation bias, for example. Um, yeah, and that's it with the dotting side. On the other side, we also used, as I mentioned, test kickoff. And to be frank, test kickoff is sounds really really similar with Three Amigos if you know the concept. So basically, an ad hoc session right before picking up new work where you have, I don't know, a QA engineer, a developer, and maybe someone from product or BAs depending on who you have, and discussing basically risks, discussing edge cases up front before implementation starts, discussing test approach details, so test impact, types of automated checks that you want covered, um, and getting that insight, I guess, up front, and getting the engineers to think about testing up front, because if you start thinking up front, how am I going to test this, you're going to see a shift in thinking as well. So something that we've seen with this is that in time we've taken a lot more we've taken an approach where we think a lot more about testability, because upfront, if you start with, okay, how am I going to test this, you're right away thinking, okay, I'm going to implement it in a way so that I can test it a lot easier. So definitely you see loads of shifts, I guess, long term. I don't know why Three Amigos never stick with us, because we tried this approach before, but I don't know exactly what happened. Maybe this experiment and the drive that we had in all of us basically to see it succeeding. Um, Maybe the name, I don't know, test kickoff definitely works for us. Um, Whenever the developer wants to pick up something new, he we have Slack channels. He writes a message and tries to gather the people. It usually takes 5-10 minutes depending on the complexity, because you should already have quite a few design analysis sessions before, so you have the context already created. This one is more deciding the details before actually getting into implementation. um, the other techniques that I mentioned there were demo. So as I mentioned, it's reviewing basically the new feature, the new change that you made, and the test evidence for feedback. This one definitely helped us at the beginning because we weren't comfortable. So QA engineers weren't quite comfortable with developers doing the testing on the same side. Engineers weren't comfortable yet; they were feeling they're missing something, so they still wanted that safety net from our QA engineers. And again, it's ad hoc on demand based on the type of changes. Throw a link to say, actually, I have here the new change. Have a look. Get me any feedback. Usually, it's a review with the QA engineer where basically they present to the quality engineer the feature, the change, and the test evidence, basically, so they can get comfortable with the change, and then we are comfortable with the change, and we are, all of us, I guess, happy at the end to be able to release. Exploratory, we started adding all team sessions. Sorry. Again, to get into the practice of thinking about exploratory, um, to um, to pair with engineers and actually learn more about exploratory tips, how you can do good exploratory testing, um, and we've done them as a group basically to get that knowledge and to bring that idea into the team. And in time, what we've understood is that we were actually ready. We were in a process where we started thinking, why not actually ship it? Because I'm comfortable releasing it because I've done all this testing up front. So it came natural to actually start thinking about the release process as well at one point. So we started looking into how actually we can add the release part, add the releases part of the whole delivery process. These were the techniques that we've used. As I mentioned, they are all very. Um, they were all presented basically from different experiments and different cycles where we tried different things. Um, so as I mentioned, we learned and we adapted all the time. So we've done loads of experiments, and it was good because we had metrics to understand those experiments. Um, So you can adjust all the time. And actually, we take retrospective really seriously because we wanted to learn, we wanted to better as a group. So all the time we were adjusting and we were changing and we were looking again to see how actually we can improve everything. Um, Keep in mind that there is a learning curve. So as we call it, hand holding. And what it means is at the beginning, you're not going to see the change yet. Actually, what happened at the beginning is that our quality engineers were seeing that they were they were they were having less time as before, even than before, because actually they were pairing a lot more. They were reviewing work. They were in a lot more sessions. And that is because at the beginning, it's that stepping basically learning curve where you need to handhold basically the engineer, the developer until he's comfortable, I guess, to go on his way, and then only come for your support when he needs it. Um, it takes time. Definitely, it takes a lot of time. You're not going to see improvements. You're not going to see changes until weeks. For us, for example, it took even months. And as I mentioned, it pair a lot basically. We were pairing quality engineers with developers all the time. We brought product in as well because we were really invested into getting everyone up front, getting that shared understanding created up front, so we can actually be faster into the delivery, into the implementation phase, and into the release phase. Because if we had that agreement up front, it's really easy to just prove the change and then make the change and ship it and learn from it. The last point that I want to make here is that it's a team effort. I think I mentioned a couple of times, if we wouldn't have the buy-in from the team and from the company itself, I don't think we would have been here, because of the learning curve, because it takes time, because for even now sometimes depending on the change, you're going to find that engineers maybe are focusing more of their time on testing and not on um, actual changes in the system. And it's something, a buy-in that you need to get from the whole team, um, from the whole organization, to understand that actually it's an effort that you do today, so you can learn from it, so you can win from it in a month's time, in 2 months time, because in time you should see an improvement into the mindset and into the ways of working. So the way we presented this was that we were already losing a lot of time. So as I mentioned, our metrics were showing that 63% of the times we were going back with bugs and changes to the tickets. Why not actually using that time to learn the practice to be better, um, and in the end be faster? Because after you're comfortable with the process, you know exactly how to do it, and you would be a lot more efficient, faster, and comfortable with the changes. A lot about this. So I'm gonna present you a bit where we are today. So overall, we increased the feature automated checks coverage. So actually, we've seen quite a bit steep increase in how many automated checks we have. We have created a lot of test dashboards, a lot of alerting for visibility, because we found ourselves in a few situations where engineers wanted to run tests, wanted to run regression tests, but they didn't quite know how to do it, where to do it, what type of test to run. Um, and now, in time, we've seen that actually the team has a full team ownership over the automated test packs. So everyone is creating automated checks, everyone is comfortable, everyone refactors the code, and who's best, I guess, to refactor, to give you feedback over the code rather than basically an engineer. So it's definitely, we've seen after we went from basically from that learning curve and everyone got comfortable with everything, we've seen a lot more ownership over the automated test packs. I already mentioned this, but we started conversations with testability in mind, and I think this is really, really important thing because if you start that conversation, so in test kickoffs, for example, if you start that conversation, okay, how am I going to test this? What do I need to test this? You automatically think about testability. So you automatically think, how do I design this system so I can test it a lot easier, basically. Um, we did have the testability in mind before as well, and our teams were really good at this, basically to ease the testability. Um, but we've definitely seen an improvement on this side as well because you start the conversation with testability in mind. So um, it's really, really good, I guess, from this perspective as well. And we've seen that actually our automated checks are smarter as well because of the way we design our systems to be testable and to be independent and to be small. Um, and of course, we always look at improving our overall processes. So as I mentioned, we take retrospectives very seriously, and we still experiment a lot. We're not even close to perfect now, but I think we are comfortable now that the teams really takes that ownership over quality. The teams takes full responsibility, basically full ownership over testing practices, and the quality engineers are actually there to offer support basically on demand rather than being there by default as a quality gatekeeper to say, yeah, this one passes, this one doesn't. Um, so this is where we are today. And actually, the data backed us up. So so this metric actually is our ticket rejection rate per quarter. So if initially here we were looking at the test phase being around 63%, what we've seen is by the end of the year, actually our testing phase was lower down to 19%. So just by doing so, just to make a point, we started this process around in September. So actually in between September and December, at 3 months time, we've already seen an improvement throughout the whole ticket rejection rate, basically. So we've seen an improvement that um, we felt as a team that actually that shared understanding was created up front. The teams were comfortable. We didn't had a lot of back and forth for the tickets, and the team was a lot more comfortable as a whole. This one is the exactly same metric, but it's per month. So if you see here, we had states where actually they were going to even 100% based. Basically, we had some difficult months. But then in December and actually this year as well, we started seeing that actually all the delivery metrics, basically ticket rejection rates, were dropping off in less than 20%. So that meant that basically we decreased with 40% the back and forth that we had on the tickets. And it's not only testing phase, as I mentioned, it was validation maybe, or code review, or basically we're looking at all the transitions that a ticket could have. What we've seen as well was that actually we started releasing. So at the beginning I mentioned that we were releasing every now and then. Actually, we're bulking releases basically. So we're having kind of a release train, trying to bulk releases together and pushing them one by one. And it had its own process. The team is now comfortable making multiple releases a day. There are small changes. They understand the impact a lot better, and they understand actually it's small change. It's not going to have an impact on the end user. So we don't necessarily have that release mantra where we release only something that's going to be impacting the user. Actually, we're going to deploy everything. Depending on the impact, basically, we're going to assess that and we're going to get comfortable with it. So we do multiple releases a day, and that's absolutely amazing as well. And because we started releasing, we actually moved our cycle time metric to look from in progress. So when we start picking up the work until it's done, until it's in live. So here currently, so I think this one is from September till today. Our average is still 6 days. So definitely we're not a continuous deployment or release everything in a day. But we've definitely seen an improvement in our times, um, and in our processes. And of course, we're still going to learn from it, and we're going to try and improve it. But that's half a time basically that we had before last year, and that's definitely a massive win for us. So, based on that information, the last part that I'm going to walk you through is, what do our QAs do now? If the developer is doing testing and they're owning the whole thing, what do they do now? And what we understood in the team is that actually, um, we don't basically, our quality assurance team is not correctly named, but actually we started looking at quality engineering and what that involves. And what it meant is, actually, in time, so during these experiments, we've seen that we evolved into new roles. And what we were doing, we were actually enabling the teams to establish and ensure the quality of the platform developed. We were providing the knowledge, the support, and the tooling basically required to achieve the levels of quality that we wanted. We were supporting with the testing work within an agile team environment. So definitely, we're still offering our T-shaped basically expertise from a testing perspective. We're still there. We're still part of the team. Um, and we do a lot of research because we want to improve. We want to drive the adoption of best practices. So a lot of our time is actually on the research and how we can improve our processes. So actually, we're not doing testing anymore. We're looking into changing our ways of working, facilitating product development, looking at the KPIs and reporting metrics because we want to see how we evolve, looking at overall test strategies, exploratory testing, behavior driven development, how we can improve that in the team, basically. So we still have one quality engineer part of each team. They're going to be as an expert in testing, basically to provide guidance and support. They're not going to be the gatekeeper anymore. And of course, we're also going to look a lot into how we can improve automation in testing, continuous integration. We're going to offer technical leadership basically on best practices as well. Uh, there are loads of things that you can do behind the scenes, but we were looking at was how we can improve the overall processes, basically how we can what do we need to do, how we can change our processes basically to be driven in the whole software development lifecycle. As I mentioned, we're looking into sustainable automation frameworks and methodology because that's a really important part as well. We're looking at scalability of the test infrastructure, CI/CD, DevOps integration, test environments, and then being there for the teams. I can go into a whole new discussion. And actually, the session that if you joined last week, basically, it was going into a lot of details into this part, basically how you can improve, what type of practices you can use to improve your processes. But yeah, basically, this is what we do now. We're trying to look over the bigger picture. We're trying to understand the bigger picture and how we can actually support the teams. So we get a lot of feedback from the teams. We create dashboards, alerting mechanisms, running tests on demand, everything basically that they need to support them to be more efficient. And you might think yourself, does the name matter? And myself, I've been in the same position for a very long time, but we were called quality assurance engineers. And as a whole, basically, as we've seen, it's everything. It's a lot more than just testing. So definitely, it's not a testing role anymore. We are evolving into more quality engineering, end-to-end building, basically software delivery processes and how we can improve basic quality from the whole process itself. We also have this false conception that QAs are quality gatekeepers, and we wanted to make sure we take the assurance from our name because it was wrongfully used. Because we wanted to acknowledge actually everyone's responsibility for quality assurance. So if everyone is responsible, why should I have this name? I feel like an imposter here because actually I don't do what I'm supposed to do based on my name, based on my responsibilities. And of course, in the end, we wanted to acknowledge our quality engineers' new responsibilities. So they were doing so much. And it's only fair to acknowledge basically their new responsibilities and their involvement in the team. Because at the end of the day, we take pride in our jobs. Um, and we want our teams to be comfortable with everything they're doing and to be proud of what they do. So for us, the name mattered, and we decided in the end that actually our chapter is going to be called quality engineering. No assurance, no assistance, no analysts, no tests. That was only our decision in the end. And coming back to the initial questions, I guess, and to the initial thoughts, our mantra was continuous delivery, because we thought that by thinking all the time how we can get into a continuous delivery, that means we're going to get into a continuous quality, because you need to think about the quality all the time. So to finish off, I guess, back to the initial questions that we had. Do we assure quality? Yes, we do. We still do assure quality. Who is responsible for quality? All of us. We need to acknowledge that actually it's a shared team responsibility, and it's not only one department that's responsible to assure quality. And how is that quality assured? Throughout your whole engineering process. So take a background look, take a step back and look at the whole process as a whole with your team and see what learning you can do from it. And that was me. Thank you very much.
I might as well mute my mic properly. Thank you very much, Joanna. That's an awesome talk as always. Got a lot of questions, so we'll try and get through as many as possible.
Okay.
Straight off, I'm going to do straight from the chat because we've got about 10, so this way it'll be a little bit quicker. First question comes from, hi, in addition to QAs and engineers, do you also have BAs embedded within each team, or a product owner working very closely with the team, helping with definition of clear AC up front?
Yes. So we don't have BAs, but we do have our product owners. So what happens in our environment is, being in financial services, our BAs are really experts in the financial advice area. Um, and we still have them in the business, but they are not close to the team. So we do have that gap. Basically, we do have that bridge. We have our product owner really close working with the team, and then they are offering, basically they are more of an enablement team. So they are there to support if we need to, but it's not embedded in the team. And then the teams, yeah, are cross-functional. So we have developers, platform engineers, a product as well in them. Hope.
Awesome, thank you. Paul Cole says, hi, given that you're in a regulated industry, how do you manage evidencing of testing and validation?
Okay, I can speak about that for a day easily. I tried on this talk, I guess, to be more high level, because definitely it's quite difficult topic. So especially being in a regulated environment, we needed to make sure at any point, and especially with the increase of the releases, we needed to make sure we do have auditing for our test evidence. So we have loads of practices. For example, all our reporting is done HTML pages pushed into Amazon S3 and tracked down to a release, basically unique ID, basically, so we can track that down. So we can see with a unique release ID, we can see all the changes that we made in the system, versions, test evidence, and everything, basically tracking back. I can put more details into it because that's very, very high level, I guess.
Perhaps sign up to the Lean Coffee morning tomorrow. You can
yeah, actually, yeah.
Richard says, how much time do you spend on your kickoff sessions, and how much coverage, what kind of coverage do these sessions aim to achieve?
So at the beginning, I think there were actually, even now, it depends on the complexity of the change, but it never takes more than 30 minutes. So usually you're looking at how you're going to, basically the details, trying to understand the risks of the change, how you're going to prove that. So the testing side, what type of testing we're going to do. Being in a microservices environment, we do have quite a few test packs. So we don't have only one regression test pack. So one activity is to actually understand the impact over that, and what type of testing, what type of automated checks we need to add, if we need to change existing ones. if we need to, I don't know, maintain, delete some of them basically. But that's why we have discussion between quality engineers and developers, so they can get comfortable in time with um, the whole, I guess, the whole suite of automated checks that we have, because it's an important part of that discussion. Hope it answered the questions.
Amazing. Got a question here from Christian. How do you overcome dev not wanting to demo? We have this step, but dev see it as a lack of trust in their work and of the QE.
We just raise it. So yeah, we're really good at calling out things in retrospectives. If they don't demo, basically, they're gonna try to ship it, and definitely someone is gonna. So we've had situations where we were ready to ship it, and then we discovered last minute that actually something, I don't know, something wasn't intended, or actually the PO had a change of mind. So he was asking a bit more questions. So definitely it's going to happen. It's more, it should only take 5 minutes. So it's not, especially at the beginning until they're comfortable, you should enforce it, part of the process, I guess. But in time, for us at least, it started dissolving out because we don't feel the need as much anymore. Very high levels.
Cool. Vignesh says, hi, what's the developer to QA ratio in this setup? What would be the QE's tasks involvement between kickoff and the demo?
So as I mentioned, currently our ratio is 1 QE to 3 developers still. But because we're taking the example of Atlassian and Jira, where they have 70 developers to 5 quality engineers, definitely we ask a question over why do we have the same amount of engineers, quality engineers. So this is the current setup. I think with the scaling of the number of engineers, we're going to try to leave the number of quality engineers the same to see if actually the model is working. And the involvement, as I mentioned at the beginning, definitely there's a lot of involvement, a lot of pairing with the developers in test kickoffs and demo, and actually testing itself, because we were doing pairing sessions during test phase as well. But in time, the time requested for a quality engineer to be in these sessions actually decreased. So it's more of on demand. So if an engineer needs us, basically they're going to request some time. I don't know, a tiny call, 5 minutes, asking some questions, getting on the same page. But definitely in the test kickoff, we do have a quality engineer in it all the time, so we can get that second thoughts, second pair of thoughts, I guess.
Awesome. So we've got a situation of great minds think alike. Both John and Richard asked the same question at the same time. How do you get the buy-in of developers in doing this?
I think yeah, that's a really good question. I think trying to present the data, it's really good. So definitely we invested a lot of time. We're trying as an organization, I guess, to be more data driven and metrics driven. So we took a bit of effort to implement data to prove that, because we've had these conversations for a long time before, and actually we didn't get that buy-in. But when we presented the data, and when we presented actual numbers to say, actually, look, from you're wasting half of your time fixing things instead of actually doing some more interesting stuff. And in time, I guess, just reminding the team all the time. So it's not a one-off activity. You need to remind the team all the time about why you're doing it and what you're trying to achieve. So you can get that buy-in from the team as well. So it's an ongoing practice, I guess.
Awesome. Ish says, did you measure the percentage gain after your changes were implemented? If so, after what time period, and how much did the 63% improve by?
I think you answered this one. Sorry, I
Yes.
jumped ahead though.
I think I had one of the slides,
okay,
yes,
sorry,
where we dropped 40%. Basically, we dropped to 19%, and that was at the beginning of 2020. Currently, we are around 15% as well, so we keep dropping it.
Richard says, could you kindly share your top 3 most used dashboards, and how do you maintain this for new staff members that join the team?
So 3 top dashboards.
Yeah.
Dashboards. Okay, so the most important one that we have is our Jenkins dashboard, where we have all our automated test jobs. So we do have some multi-configuration products. So we have loads of tests running in multiple configurations, environments, so on and so forth. So it's good to keep that dashboard basically where you see at a glance everything is green, everything is red, or something happened. Um, that's the first one. The second one we do have, so we use Jira, our tracking tool, issue tracking tool, and we do have a dashboard there where we look at number of bugs in production because we want to see basically if we keep doing this practice, do we miss things? And if we do, how we can learn actually to bring them again at the beginning of the process. Um, Number of releases, as I mentioned, we want to see an improvement of cycle time. It's really important how often you release and the number of releases. So these two are definitely good metrics to start with. Um, and I think that's pretty much, I don't know if I missed anything, but that's pretty much all for now. The other important metric that we didn't manage to get around to yet is the automation coverage. So this is something that we're trying to look into to see how actually we can track, we can get some numbers so we can actually present the data because currently we don't have a way to present it.
So I'll make this last question very conscious of time. This comes from Seema. How do you measure success of QE teams? If you're not gatekeepers of release and quality is shared responsibility and devs help automate?
That's a really good question. And actually,
We better get that one in there.
Yeah, well, we're discussing it in our engineering teams as well because it's quite a strange role. So we don't want to track tickets because our main role is to be support in the delivery team. So definitely quite a bit of time is going to be supporting the team. But as I mentioned, I think with the other bits, I think we identified a couple of metrics that are our success criteria, basically success metrics. So the cycle time, I think, if the cycle time increases, definitely it's a problem in the quality overall, and that means it's a problem in the pairing with the quality engineers as well. And we still believe it's valid. It's valid for the whole delivery team and the quality engineers as well. We're looking at ticket rejection rate, so that's definitely our metric for our quality engineers to see basically back and forth, and if we need to support the teams more. So we're still looking at that. Cycle time. Should I mention that? I think I mentioned that already. Sorry. Number of releases, number of issues in production, basically, again, to see how efficient we are. And the only success rate only available for the QE team, as I mentioned, is the automation coverage. That's the only one that we think is valuable for us because if we have enough coverage, it means we offer enough support for the teams to do their own work, and we are there to support, to offer the tooling, the environments, the CI infrastructure, and anything they would need to support that. So this is something that we're currently looking into, but we don't have a solution yet.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ioana. So guys, just hang about for one more minute so I do a quick wrap up. I mean, I think that's a sign that we had a very, very good thought-provoking talk. There's a lot of really, really good questions there. So thank you so much for that, Ioana. It's super duper.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, definitely. So as you guys know, we've launched a Lean Coffee series that will be tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Ioana's going to be present for that, and it's going to be based on Ioana's talk today. It is limited slots on, so if you're interested in that, please sign up and drop me a message on LinkedIn Connect so I can get the details to you. Other than that, next week, I'm happy to announce our next event, which is going to be with Amit. It's going to be on a new open source tool come from Thoughts called Kaito. Basically, there's a lot of talk in the software industry today about browser automation tools like Cypress, Puppeteer, WebDriver, Test Cafe, and Test Project. No one seems to be talking about Tycho, an automation tool from ThoughtWorks, the company that created Selenium WebDriver and Cucumber. In this talk, he's going to take you through some of the key features of Tycho and why he feels you should consider this simple yet powerful tool. So that's next week's talk. That'll be going up on the Meetup webpage shortly. We're also in the process of the QA Babble team putting a questionnaire together, which we'll be releasing to all the members. Just get your feedback, thoughts, suggestions, etc. Because that's some really great feedback on these webinars. We want to make sure we keep these moving forwards, and basically everyone's getting amazing stuff from that. So From that, guys, thank you so much. As always, it's really, really appreciated. Any questions, just give me a shout by preferred avenue. From that, take care, and I'll see you all guys soon.